My name is Clara Ashford. I'm 29 years old. 6 weeks ago, I stood in the back of a ballroom watching my younger sister Natalie walk down the aisle in a $40,000 wedding dress, paid for by our parents. The same parents who told me, 3 years ago, that there wasn't enough money for my future, that I needed to learn to manage expectations, that some daughters are investments and some are just expenses. I watched 200 guests rise from their chairs. I watched my father walk Natalie to the altar with tears in his eyes. I watched my mother dab her face with a silk handkerchief from the front row, beaming like she was witnessing a miracle. And I stood there, in a bridesmaid dress I'd bought myself because no one offered to cover it, holding a bouquet someone had shoved into my hands 5 minutes before the ceremony. And I felt absolutely nothing, because I knew something no one else in that room knew. Not my parents, not Natalie, not her groom, Philip Ashford Cole, whose family name sounded like a law firm and whose smile never quite reached his eyes. My grandfather, William Ashford, the man who built everything my family has, had left behind one final document. A will. The real one. The one that my parents had spent 3 years pretending didn't exist. And in approximately 2 hours and 14 minutes, a phone call was going to come through that would crack that ballroom wide open. By the end of the night, Philip would remove his ring. My father's hands would be shaking. My mother would be sobbing in the bathroom. And 200 guests would learn that the Ashford family's golden daughter was built on a lie. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this all started. Before I continue, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this story. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love connecting with you all. Now, let me tell you about the Ashford family. The Ashfords are not famous. We're not billionaires. But in our town, in the suburbs north of Philadelphia, the Ashford name carries weight. My grandfather William built Ashford Development Group from a single hardware store in 1968. By the time I was born, it had grown into a regional construction and property development company, worth roughly $18 million. Modest by Manhattan standards, an empire by ours. Grandpa William was a self-made man in the truest sense. 8th grade education, calloused hands, a mind that could calculate material costs faster than any spreadsheet. He built the company with sweat and stubbornness, and he raised his only son, my father, Robert Ashford, to take it over. My father took it over all right, but he didn't build it further. He maintained it, coasted on the reputation Grandpa William had earned, played golf with clients, delegated the hard decisions, and focused most of his energy on one thing: appearances. The Ashford family had to look perfect. The house, a 6-bedroom colonial on Maple Ridge Drive, had to have the greenest lawn on the street. The cars had to be new every 3 years. The Christmas card had to feature all of us smiling in matching outfits. And the daughters? Well, the daughters had to be presentable. That's where the trouble started. Because in my parents' eyes, Natalie was presentable, and I was a project. Natalie was born 2 years after me. She came into the world beautiful and stayed that way. Blonde hair that curled perfectly without effort. Blue eyes that made people stop mid-sentence. A natural ease with strangers that my parents called charisma and social intelligence. I came into the world quiet. Brown hair, brown eyes, a face that my mother once described to Aunt Helen as pleasant enough, but not striking. I heard that conversation through the kitchen door when I was 9. I didn't know what striking meant, so I looked it up. Then I wished I hadn't. Where Natalie was sunshine, I was overcast. Where she was effortless, I was deliberate. I read books instead of attending parties. I drew architectural blueprints in my notebook instead of doodling hearts. I asked questions that made adults uncomfortable, like, why does Natalie get a bigger room when I'm older? And, Why did you frame her dance recital photo but not my science fair certificate? The answers were always variations of the same deflection. Natalie's room has better light for her skin. She's sensitive to darkness. The dance photo was just so vibrant. Your certificate is on the fridge, sweetheart. The fridge. Where things go to be seen once and then buried under takeout menus. By the time I was 12, I'd stopped asking questions. I'd learned the hierarchy. Natalie was the show horse. I was the workhorse. She got the spotlight. I got the chores. And the only person who seemed to notice was Grandpa William. Every Saturday morning from the time I was 7 until I turned 17, I went to Grandpa William's house. It was a modest place. Surprisingly so for a man worth millions. 3 bedrooms, a vegetable garden, a workshop in the garage where he still built birdhouses even after his arthritis made it painful. Natalie came sometimes when she was younger, but she'd get bored after 20 minutes and ask to be picked up. I stayed all day. I'd sit in his workshop watching him work, asking questions about joints and load-bearing walls and why certain wood grains were stronger than others. "You've got the eye, Clara," he'd say, holding up a piece of oak for my inspection. "You see how things fit together. That's rare." When I was 13, he started teaching me about the business. Not the executive stuff, not the boardroom politics. The bones of it. How to read a site plan. How to estimate material costs. How to walk a property and know, just by looking, and whether the foundation was sound. "Your father sees buildings as investments," Grandpa told me once. We were sitting on his porch, drinking lemonade, watching the sun set behind the row of houses he'd built 40 years ago. "He sees dollar signs. You see structure. You see how things hold together." He paused. "That's why I worry about him. And that's why I believe in you." I didn't understand what he meant by worry. Not then. "Grandpa, do Mom and Dad love me the same as Natalie?" The question came out before I could stop it. I was 14. We were in his workshop. He was sanding a birdhouse. His hands stopped moving. "What makes you ask that?" I feel like they see her differently, like she matters more." He set down the sandpaper, took off his glasses, and looked at me with those deep-set brown eyes that had seen 70 years of the world. "Clara, your parents love you, but love and understanding aren't the same thing. They understand Natalie. She's easy for them to see." He put his glasses back on. "You're harder to see. Not because you're less. Because you're deeper. Some people don't know how to look past the surface." He picked up the birdhouse again. "I see you, Clara Bear. Don't ever forget that." I didn't forget. I carried those words like a stone in my pocket, smooth and heavy, something to hold on to when everything else felt uncertain. 3 years later, Grandpa William was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. The diagnosis came in March. By September, he was gone. Those last 6 months were the most important of my life, and the most painful. And I visited him every day after school. I'd sit by his bed in the hospice, reading to him from the construction trade journals he loved, or just sitting in silence when the morphine made conversation impossible. My parents visited twice a week. Structured visits. 30 minutes. My father would talk about the company, giving updates that Grandpa William was too tired to process. My mother would arrange flowers and make small talk with the nurses. Natalie came once. She stayed for 15 minutes, cried prettily in the hallway, and asked to leave because hospitals make me anxious. I was there every day, every single day for 6 months. 2 weeks before he died, Grandpa William asked the nurses to give us privacy. His voice was barely a whisper by then. I had to lean close, my ear almost touching his lips. "Clara, listen to me. I'm here, Grandpa. I've done something your father doesn't know about." My heart rate spiked. "What do you mean?" "My lawyer, Margaret Zhao. She has a document. A new will. He paused, gathering strength. The old will? The one your father knows about? It splits everything evenly between him and his brother David. But this new one, he coughed, a thin, rattling sound. This one is different. Grandpa, you don't have to. I do. His hand found mine. Papery skin, bones too close to the surface. Your father has been mismanaging the company for years, skimming profits, making deals that benefit his friends, neglecting maintenance on properties. I've watched it happen. Margaret has documented everything. I felt cold. Does Dad know you know? No, and he won't. Not until it's time. Another cough. The new will leaves controlling interest of Ashford Development to you, Clara. 51%. Natalie gets a trust fund, $200,000. Enough to start a life. Your father gets the title of CEO, but only with board oversight. And you. His eyes found mine. Clear. Fierce. You get the power to fix what he's broken. Grandpa, I'm 17. I can't. Not now. The will activates when you turn 25. Until then, Margaret will hold it. She'll protect it. And she'll find you when you're ready. His grip tightened. Promise me something. Anything? Don't let them erase you, Clara. Don't let them make you small. You were born to build things. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. I promised. I promised with tears streaming down my face in a hospice room that smelled like antiseptic and endings. 2 weeks later, he was gone. I held his hand at the end. The only grandchild at his bedside. Grandpa William's funeral was a spectacle. My father made sure of that. 300 people. Catered reception. A eulogy that made Robert Ashford sound like a devoted son rather than the man who'd visited his dying father twice a week for 30 minutes at a time. My father was my hero, Robert said from the podium, voice cracking with rehearsed emotion. Everything I am, everything this family has, is because of him. I sat in the second row, not the first. The first row was reserved for my parents and Natalie. An usher had directed me to the second row, with the extended family. My mother hadn't corrected him. I watched my father accept condolences for 3 hours. I watched him shake hands with business associates who clapped him on the shoulder and said things like, "William would be proud," and "The company's in good hands." I watched him play the role of grieving patriarch while I sat with cousins I barely knew, eating catered sandwiches and wondering if anyone would notice if I disappeared. One person noticed. A woman in her early 50s, Chinese American, dark hair streaked with silver, wearing a simple black suit that somehow looked more expensive than anything my mother owned. She approached me during the reception, waited until I was alone by the dessert table. "Clara Ashford?" "Yes." "My name is Margaret Zhao." She handed me a business card. Thick stock, embossed lettering. Zhao and Associates. Estate law. Your grandfather was my client and my friend. My breath caught. "You're the lawyer." "I am." She didn't smile, didn't soften. Just looked at me with steady, assessing eyes. "William spoke about you constantly. He wanted me to meet you, but not like this." A pause. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you." "I'm not going to say anything else today. This isn't the time. But I want you to know that I have everything. Everything your grandfather wanted to protect. And when the time comes, I'll find you." She squeezed my hand once, briefly, and disappeared into the crowd. I looked down at her business card. On the back, in Grandpa William's shaky handwriting, were 3 words. "Trust her, Clara Bear." I put the card in my wallet. It stayed there for the next 12 years. After Grandpa William's death, the old will, the one my father knew about, was executed without issue. Robert Ashford inherited 50% of Ashford Development Group. Uncle David got the other 50%. though he lived in Oregon and had no interest in running the company. He sold his shares to Robert within a year for $4.2 million, making my father the sole owner. The company was now worth roughly $18 million, all of it in Robert's hands. And that's when everything changed. Not immediately. It happened slowly, the way erosion works. You don't see it day to day, but over years, the landscape shifts. First, it was the house. We'd always lived comfortably, but within a year of Grandpa's death, my parents upgraded everything. New kitchen, $120,000 renovation, new cars for both of them, a Mercedes for Dad, a BMW for Mom, a swimming pool that cost more than most people's annual salary. Natalie got her own car at 16, a white Audi A3. Every girl needs her first car to be special, Mom said. I got my license the same year. My car was a 10-year-old Honda Accord that Grandpa William had driven to job sites. It runs fine, Dad said. You don't need anything fancy. Then it was the education. Natalie decided she wanted to attend Whitmore Academy, a private high school with a $35,000 a year tuition. My parents didn't blink. When I asked about advanced placement courses at our public school, which cost $200 per exam, my mother sighed. We've already stretched the budget with Natalie's school, Clara. Can't you just take regular classes? I took the AP exams anyway. Paid for them myself with money I earned working weekends at a local architecture firm. The architect, a woman named Susan Park. He had seen my blueprints in a school exhibition and offered me a part-time position. $12 an hour, filing and drafting. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. Susan became the second person, after Grandpa William, who saw me clearly. You have real talent, Clara, she told me one afternoon. I was 17, hunched over a drafting table, working on a residential design I'd been developing in my spare time. Have you thought about architecture school? My parents won't pay for it. How do you know? Because they're paying for Natalie's everything. There's nothing left. Susan set down her coffee. There's always something left. You just have to know where to look. That night, she emailed me a list of 47 architecture scholarships. I applied to every single one. Senior year. The conversation that changed everything. It was a Tuesday evening in April. I just received my acceptance to the Pennsylvania Institute of Architecture, one of the best programs in the state. Full tuition would be $38,000 a year. I'd received a partial scholarship covering 40%, which left $22,800 annually. A lot of money, but not impossible. Not with loans and part-time work. I came downstairs with the acceptance letter. My parents were in the living room. Dad on his leather recliner. Mom on the sofa with a glass of wine. Natalie was out, probably at a friend's house. I got in, I said, holding up the letter. Pennsylvania Institute of Architecture. And I got a scholarship. It covers almost half. Dad looked up from his phone. How much is the rest? About $23,000 a year. But with loans and my job at Susan's firm. Clara. He set down his phone. Sit down. I sat. Something in his tone made my stomach drop. Your mother and I have been discussing this. He glanced at Mom. She was studying her wine glass like it held the answers to the universe. With Natalie starting at Penn State next year, and the costs of Whitmore still on the books, we've had to make some decisions about family finances. Okay. We've decided to fully fund Natalie's education. Room, board, sorority fees, everything. She needs the full college experience to build the connections that will serve her in life. I waited. For you. He paused, cleared his throat. We think it's best if you take a more practical approach. Community college for 2 years, then transfer somewhere affordable. There's a good program at Mercer County. The room tilted. Community college? It's not a punishment, Clara. It's just reality. Sighed, we can't fund 2 full educations. He shrugged. Actually shrugged like he was deciding between lunch options. Natalie's situation is different. She's going to build relationships, network. She'll marry well. That's an investment that pays off. And me? My father looked at me. And what he said next? I will carry with me for the rest of my life. You're smart, Clara, I'll give you that. But smart doesn't always translate to success. You're not visible enough. You don't light up a room. You don't make connections. People don't remember you. He shifted in his chair. We have to be honest about strengths and limitations. Natalie's strengths are social. Yours are practical. So we're investing accordingly. Practical. Not visible. People don't remember you. I looked at my mother. Mom? She wouldn't meet my eyes, and she took a sip of wine and said, in a voice so quiet I almost missed it, Your father's right, sweetheart. We have to be realistic. Realistic? That was the word they used to disguise the truth. They didn't believe in me. I stood up. My legs felt strange, disconnected from my body. Okay, I heard myself say. I understand. I went to my room. I didn't cry. I'd stopped crying over their decisions years ago. Instead, I sat on my bed, opened my laptop, and searched for every full-ride scholarship in architecture that existed in the United States. I found one. The Harrison Foundation Fellowship. Full tuition. Living stipend. Awarded to 3 students nationally. The application was due in 6 weeks. The essay prompt. Describe a structure you would build and why. I wrote about a house. Not a mansion, not a skyscraper. A house for a family where every room was equal. Where no bedroom was bigger than another. Where every window let in the same amount of light. I submitted the application at 3:47 a.m. on a Wednesday. 6 weeks later, I received an email that began with the word, "Congratulations." I told no one in my family. Let me pause here for a moment. If you've ever been told you weren't worth the investment, if someone in your family decided your sibling's future mattered more than yours, I want you to type the word "worthy" in the comments. Let me know I'm not alone in this. And if you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button. Trust me, what happens next is worth staying for. Now, back to the story. I left for college without a goodbye dinner, without a care package, without a single photo on my parents' Facebook page. Natalie's departure for Penn State 2 weeks later was an event. Mom cried. Dad loaded her brand new Volkswagen with monogrammed luggage. They drove her to campus, set up her dorm room, took her to dinner at the nicest restaurant in town, and posted 17 photos with captions like, "Our baby's all grown up," and "So proud of this one." My departure consisted of loading 2 suitcases into my Honda Accord, hugging my mother in the driveway while she checked her phone, and my father saying, "Drive safe. Call if you need anything." He didn't ask which school I was attending. He assumed community college. I didn't correct him. The Pennsylvania Institute of Architecture was nothing like I'd imagined. It was harder, more demanding, more competitive. Students came from backgrounds of privilege, kids whose parents were architects. Engineers, designers. They had portfolios filled with summer programs and international study tours. I had blueprints I'd drawn on Susan Park's drafting table and a scholarship that covered everything except the chip on my shoulder. But I had something they didn't. I had Grandpa William's eye, the ability to see how things fit together, the instinct for structure that no amount of money could buy. First semester, I nearly broke. The workload was crushing. I worked 20 hours a week at a local firm to cover food and expenses not included in my scholarship. I slept 5 hours a night. I ate instant oatmeal for dinner 3 nights a week. But I made it through. 3.9 GPA. Top of my studio class. My professor, Dr. James Whitaker, pulled me aside after my final review. "Clara, this is exceptional work. Wait, where did you study before this?" "Nowhere. Public high school." I learned from my grandfather and a woman named Susan Park. He studied me for a long moment. You have a rare gift. Don't waste it. I didn't intend to. Sophomore year, I won my first design competition, a mixed-use community center for underserved neighborhoods. The prize was $5,000 and publication in an architecture journal. I was 20 years old, and my design was being discussed by professionals 3 times my age. Junior year, I interned at one of the top architecture firms in Philadelphia. They offered me a full-time position upon graduation. Starting salary? $78,000. More than my father had made at my age, even with Grandpa Williams' company behind him. Senior year, I graduated first in my class, summa cum laude. The dean mentioned my name in his commencement address as an example of what determination and vision can accomplish. My parents weren't there. They didn't know I was graduating. As far as they knew, I was still in community college, still figuring things out, still being practical. I let them believe that. Because the truth was more useful as a secret. While I was building my career, my family was building a mythology. I heard things. Through cousins, through social media, through the occasional awkward phone call with my mother, who'd ring every few months with updates I hadn't asked for. Natalie graduated from Penn State with a 2.7 GPA and a degree in communications. She'd changed her major 3 times, dropped 2 courses, and spent most of her college career building a social media following that peaked at 14,000 followers before the algorithm moved on. After graduation, she moved back home. Just temporarily, Mom assured me on one of our calls. She's exploring her options. Exploring her options lasted 2 years. During that time, my parents funded her apartment downtown, $1,800 a month. Her car payments, $450 a month. Her credit card bills, averaging $3,000 a month. And a personal brand consultant, $200 an hour, who was supposed to help her monetize her Instagram presence. Total cost of Natalie's post-graduation exploration, roughly $140,000 over 2 years. I knew this because Uncle David, who still had contacts in the family's financial circle, told me during a phone call on my 24th birthday, the only family member who remembered it. "Your father's burning through cash, Clara," David said. "The company's profits are down. He's been taking distributions that don't make sense, and Natalie's lifestyle is a black hole. Why are you telling me this?" "Because your grandfather made me promise to watch out for you. And because I think you should know what's happening to your inheritance before there's nothing left to inherit." Inheritance. The word hit like a bell. "Uncle David, do you know about—" I hesitated. "About Grandpa's other will?" Silence. Then, "I know Margaret Zhao. I know William trusted her. And I know that whatever he arranged, it was for you." A pause. "Be patient, Clara. The time will come." I hung up and stared at my phone. Margaret Zhao's business card was still in my wallet. I'd carried it for 7 years without using it. Not yet. I told myself, not yet. Then came Philip. Philip Cole, or Philip Ashford Cole as he'd later style himself, arrived in Natalie's life like a character from a movie she'd been writing in her head since childhood. Tall, square jaw, family money, old money, the kind that came with a hyphenated last name and a summer house in the Hamptons. They met at a charity gala that my parents had spent $5,000 to attend. Natalie wore a $3,200 dress. Philip wore a suit that cost more than my first car. They were engaged within 8 months. My mother called me with the news. Her voice was vibrating with excitement. "Clara, you won't believe it. Natalie is engaged. To Philip Cole, the Coles. Do you know who they are?" "I don't, Mom." "They're one of the most prominent families on the main line. Philip's father is a senior partner at Whitmore. Cole and Associates. His mother chairs the Philadelphia Arts Council. This is the connection your father always dreamed of for this family." Congratulations to Natalie. The wedding is going to be at the Belmont Country Club. June. Your father is handling the budget. We're thinking 200 guests, maybe more. Sounds expensive. This is once in a lifetime, Clara. You can't put a price on something like this. Actually, you can. The price was $180,000, I found out later. Clara, we'd love for you to be a bridesmaid. Natalie wants you involved. Natalie does? Of course. You're her sister. I almost laughed. We hadn't had a real conversation in 3 years. The last time I saw Natalie, she'd asked me to help her move furniture into her new apartment, and then left to get brunch before I finished. I carried a couch up 3 flights of stairs alone. I'll think about it, I said. Also, Clara, Mom's voice dipped, that tone, the one that preceded a request disguised as a suggestion. The wedding planner we hired is very expensive. Your father is covering most of it, but we're a little stretched. If you could contribute, maybe help with the bridesmaid dresses? Or the shower? There it was. Not an invitation. An invoice. How much? Well, the bridesmaid dresses are $400 each. And Natalie was hoping you could host the bridal shower. Nothing fancy. Maybe $2,000 for a nice brunch? $2,400. For the privilege of participating in my sister's wedding while my own education had been dismissed as impractical. I'll handle the dress, I said. I can't do the shower. Silence. Then, Clara, don't be difficult. I'm not being difficult, Mom. I'm being realistic. I used their word deliberately. I'll see you at the wedding. I hung up. And that night, for the first time in 12 years, I took Margaret Zhao's card out of my wallet and dialed her number. She answered on the second ring. I was wondering when you'd call, she said. Margaret Zhao's office was in a brownstone in Center City, Philadelphia. Understated, elegant. The kind of place where the quality of the furniture told you everything about the quality of the counsel. She greeted me at the door herself. 12 years hadn't changed her much. Same sharp eyes, same economy of movement. A few more silver strands in her hair, but otherwise, the same woman who'd handed me a business card at my grandfather's funeral. Clara, do you look like him? Like Grandpa? Same eyes, same way of standing, like you're assessing the load-bearing capacity of the room. She smiled for the first time. Please, sit. Her office was lined with bookshelves. Legal texts, yes, but also architecture books, construction manuals, framed photographs of buildings I recognized as Grandpa Williams' projects. On her desk, a small wooden frame held a photo of Grandpa William and Margaret at what looked like a construction site, both wearing hard hats, both laughing. He was more than a client, she said, noticing my gaze. He was a mentor. Gave me my first legal work when no other firm would hire a woman of color in the 80s. I owe him everything. He had that effect on people. He did. She opened a drawer and pulled out a thick manila envelope. And he had very specific plans for his legacy. She spread the documents across her desk. The will, a 60-page document with exhibits, notarized and witnessed, dated 14 months before Grandpa Williams' death. A forensic accounting report, bank statements, property assessments. Let me walk you through what your grandfather left you, Margaret said. And then, let me show you what your father has been doing with the company. For the next 3 hours, I sat in that office and watched my family's financial history unfold like a crime scene. The will was clear. 51% of Ashford Development Group's shares were left to me, Clara Ashford, to be activated upon my 25th birthday, or upon discovery of financial malfeasance by the current CEO, whichever came first. The remaining 49% was to be held in trust, managed by a board that Margaret would assemble. Natalie received a trust fund of $200,000, payable in installments over 10 years, with a condition. The funds could not be used by or transferred to Robert Ashford under any circumstances. My father received nothing additional beyond his existing salary as CEO, and even that was conditional on annual performance reviews by the independent board. Your grandfather knew, Clara. Margaret's voice was measured. He knew Robert was taking money from the company. He documented it. The forensic accounting report was devastating. Over the past 12 years, my father had withdrawn $2.3 million in unauthorized distributions. Money that should have been reinvested in the company. Money that went to the house, the cars, Natalie's lifestyle, the wedding. The company is still profitable, Margaret continued, but it's weakened. Properties are undermaintained. Contracts are being underbid. 2 of the best project managers quit last year because Robert wouldn't approve necessary equipment purchases. She paused. Your grandfather built this company to last 100 years. At this rate, it has maybe 10. I stared at the numbers. Does my father know about this will? No. William was very specific about that. The will was filed with the probate court under seal. Your father's attorneys executed the old will, the one that gave him everything. They never searched for a subsequent document because they had no reason to. And the seal? Can be broken by me, as executor, at any time, or by you, as beneficiary, after your 25th birthday. She checked a date on the document. Which was 4 years ago, Clara. You've been the rightful majority owner of Ashford Development since you turned 25. The room spun. Why didn't you contact me? William's instructions were clear. I was to wait until you came to me. He said. She smiled. That same sad, knowing smile. He said you'd call when you were ready. When the pain finally outweighed the patience. I thought about Natalie's wedding. About the $180,000 my father was spending on a party while the company Grandpa William built crumbled from the inside. About the $2,400 I'd been asked to contribute for the privilege of being a bridesmaid. I'm ready, I said. Margaret nodded. Then let's discuss timing. The wedding is in 3 months. I know. I looked at her. She looked back. And in that look, I saw exactly what Grandpa William had seen in her 30 years ago. Someone who understood that justice isn't about speed, it's about precision. Not at the wedding, I said. I don't want to destroy the day. Agreed? But after? After, yes. Once I have everything in order. Once there's no room for them to deny it. Margaret pulled out a legal pad. Then here's what we do. The next 3 months were a dual existence. By day, I was Clara Ashford, dutiful bridesmaid, quiet daughter, the one who showed up when asked and disappeared when convenient. By night, I was Clara Ashford, majority shareholder of a company my family didn't know I owned. Margaret and I met weekly. She introduced me to a forensic accountant named David Chen, who built a comprehensive timeline of my father's unauthorized withdrawals. She connected me with a corporate attorney named Rachel Torres, who specialized in shareholder rights and fiduciary duty. The case is strong, Rachel told me during our second meeting. Your father has been withdrawing company funds for personal use without board approval. That's a breach of fiduciary duty. Combined with the will, which gives you controlling interest, you have the legal standing to demand a full audit, restructure the board, and if necessary, remove him as CEO. I don't want to remove him, I said. Not yet. I want him to have the chance to do the right thing. Rachel raised an eyebrow. In my experience, people who've been stealing for 12 years don't suddenly develop a conscience. Maybe not. But my grandfather believed in second chances. I owe him that much. Margaret smiled. William always said you'd handle it with grace. Grace. I wasn't sure about grace, but I knew I didn't want revenge. I wanted accountability. There's a difference, and it matters. The wedding planning consumed the Ashford household like a fever. Every conversation was about the wedding. Every dollar, every decision, every breath was directed toward making Natalie's day the event of the season. I played my part. I attended dress fittings. I addressed invitations in calligraphy because Natalie insisted, and Clara has the neatest handwriting. I organized the seating chart, coordinated with the florist, handled RSVPs from 200 guests, most of whom I'd never met. Nobody thanked me. Nobody asked if I minded. It was simply assumed that I would do these things because that's what I did. Clara helps. Clara manages. Clara doesn't complain. 2 months before the wedding, Natalie called me. It was the first time she'd called me directly in over a year. Usually, communication went through Mom. Clara, I need a favor. What is it? Philip's parents want to have dinner with our family. All of us. They want to get to know us before the wedding. Okay. The thing is, she hesitated. They're very traditional, very proper. And I've told them a bit about our family and, well, they might have the impression that you're more involved in the family business than you actually are. What impression exactly? I might have said you work for Ashford Development, in a senior capacity. I closed my eyes. Natalie, I don't work for Ashford Development. I know, but they kept asking about the family, and it sounded weird to say my sister works at some random architecture firm they've never heard of. Philip's family is all about legacy. They want to know we're solid, that the Ashford name means something. So you lied. I embellished. There's a difference. There isn't. Clara, please, just play along for one dinner. It's important. Important to whom? To me, to the family, to everything. Her voice turned sharp. Can you not be difficult for once? This is my wedding. This is the biggest thing that's ever happened to our family. The biggest thing that's ever happened to our family. As if Grandpa William building an empire from nothing was just background noise. Fine, I said. One dinner. Thank you. Oh, and Clara, wear something nice. Not your usual, practical stuff. She hung up. I stared at my phone and thought about the documents in Margaret Zhao's office. About the $2.3 million my father had stolen. About the company that was rightfully mine. One dinner. I could manage one dinner. The dinner was at a restaurant called Marcello's. White tablecloths, crystal glasses, the kind of place where the menu didn't list prices because if you had to ask, you couldn't afford it. Philip's parents, Richard and Catherine Cole, were exactly what I'd expected. Polished, patrician. The kind of people who measured worth in zip codes and alma maters. Richard Cole was tall, silver-haired, with the confident bearing of a man who'd never been told no. Catherine was elegant in the way that required significant financial maintenance. Designer dress, tasteful jewelry, a smile that assessed you even as it welcomed you. My parents were performing. That's the only word for it. Dad in his best suit. Mom in a dress I'd never seen, tags probably still hidden somewhere. Natalie glittered between them in emerald green, her hand resting possessively on Philip's arm. And then there was me. Simple black dress, no jewelry except Grandpa William's watch, which he'd left me and which my parents had tried to give to Natalie before I quietly took it from the estate box. So, Clara, Richard Cole turned to me during the appetizer course. Natalie tells us you're involved in the family business. I felt Natalie stiffen beside me. I have a background in architecture and construction. Wonderful. The Ashford Development Group, is it? Impressive operation. How long has it been in the family? My grandfather founded it in 1968. And you work there in what capacity? Natalie's eyes were boring into the side of my head. My parents were frozen, their performative smiles slightly strained. I'm more of a consultant, I said carefully. I focus on structural assessment and development strategy. It wasn't a lie. Not technically. In 3 months, I would own 51% of the company. If that wasn't a senior capacity, nothing was. Richard nodded, impressed. Smart family. Keeps the business in the blood. It certainly does, I said. Under the table, Natalie squeezed my hand. Not affection, a warning. Don't say anything else. I didn't. I sat through 2 hours of my father inflating his accomplishments, my mother complimenting Catherine's taste in wine, and Natalie performing the role of doting fiancé with the precision of someone who'd been rehearsing for years. Philip, I noticed, said very little. He smiled when required, agreed with his parents, and watched Natalie with an expression I couldn't quite read. It wasn't adoration, it was evaluation, like he was appraising a property before making an offer. I didn't like him. I couldn't articulate why, exactly. He hadn't done anything wrong, but something about the way he looked at Natalie, at the restaurant, at my father's watch, made me uneasy. After dinner, as we waited for the valets to bring our cars, Catherine Cole took my arm. Clara, dear, it's refreshing to meet a young woman who works in the family business. So many girls your age have no ambition. Thank you, Mrs. Cole. Philip needs a family with substance. Not just money. Substance. She patted my arm. I can see the Ashfords have that. I smiled. Because what else could I do? The substance she admired was built by a man who was turning in his grave, maintained by a granddaughter no one in this family valued, and funded by money that was being stolen from a company that would soon change hands. Substance. If only she knew. I need to pause here for a second. If you've ever had to sit through a dinner, a party, or a family event pretending everything was fine while your world was silently falling apart, type, I know that feeling, in the comments. And if you want to see what happened at the wedding, keep watching. Because we're about to get there, and trust me, you're not ready. Now, back to the story. The wedding day arrived on a Saturday in June. Perfect weather. Blue sky. Slight breeze. The kind of day that made you believe in fairy tales. Or at least, made you understand why people wanted to. The Belmont Country Club was stunning. White columns, manicured gardens, a ballroom that could seat 300 with room for a dance floor and a 12-piece orchestra. My mother had spent 6 months turning it into what she called a vision, which apparently meant $40,000 worth of white roses, custom lighting, and a 7-tier cake that looked like it belonged in a museum. I arrived at 7 a.m. for preparations, not because I wanted to, because I'd been assigned a list of tasks that would take a full day to complete. 7 a.m. Confirm floral delivery. 8 a.m. Meet caterer, review final menu. 9 a.m. Set up welcome table with guest book, seating cards, favors. 10 a.m. Hair and makeup for bridesmaids. I was last in the rotation, of course. 12 p.m. Help Natalie into her dress. 1 p.m. Final walkthrough with wedding planner. 2 p.m. Ceremony begins. I was the bridesmaid, the coordinator, and the crisis manager rolled into one. The actual wedding planner, a brittle woman named Cheryl who charged $15,000 for the privilege of being stressed, spent most of the morning on her phone dealing with another event. By noon, I'd handled a missing centerpiece delivery, a groomsman who showed up drunk, and a flower girl who refused to wear her dress because it was itchy. I hadn't eaten, I hadn't sat down, and the ceremony hadn't even started. The bridal suite was on the second floor of the club. When I arrived to help Natalie with her dress, Mom was already there. Along with Natalie's 3 other bridesmaids, sorority sisters from Penn State whose names I could never keep straight. They were drinking champagne and taking selfies. Natalie stood in the center of the room in her $40,000 Vera Wang gown. It was, objectively, beautiful. Layers of silk organza, hand-sewn beading, a train that would require 2 people to manage. She looked like a princess. She'd always looked like a princess. "Clara, there you are." Mom waved me over. "Help me with the buttons. There are 47 of them." I knelt behind my sister and began fastening tiny silk buttons one by one. My knees ached against the hardwood floor. Nobody offered me a cushion. "Is everything set downstairs?" Natalie asked, examining herself in the mirror. "Everything's perfect." "The peonies?" I specifically wanted peonies at the altar. "Not roses. Peonies are there. I checked twice." "Good." She tilted her head, studying her reflection. "Clara, can you adjust my veil? It's sitting weird." I stood, carefully arranged the cathedral-length veil, smoothed the lace. Our eyes met in the mirror. "You look beautiful," I said. And I meant it. Whatever Natalie was, whatever our relationship had become, she was my sister, and she was beautiful on her wedding day. "Thanks." She turned back to the mirror. Not to me, to herself. "Mom, where's my lipstick? The Chanel one?" I stepped back. My job was done. I'd fastened the buttons, fixed the veil, confirmed the flowers. I was no longer needed in this room. I found a quiet corner in the hallway and ate a granola bar I'd hidden in my purse. Through the window, I could see guests arriving, luxury cars lining the circular drive, men in tailored suits, women in designer dresses, the Cole family arriving in a black Rolls-Royce, and somewhere, in a law office across town, Margaret Zhao was waiting. The ceremony was beautiful. I'll give them that. 200 guests seated in white chairs on the south lawn. The string quartet played Pachelbel's canon as the bridal party processed. I walked down the aisle with a groomsman named Tyler, who gripped my arm too tightly and smelled like cologne and anxiety. Natalie floated down the aisle on my father's arm. She was radiant. Dad was weeping. Mom was weeping. Catherine Cole was nodding approvingly. Richard Cole was already calculating the merger of family assets. Philip stood at the altar in a custom Tom Ford tuxedo. His smile was perfect. His posture was perfect. Everything about him was perfect. Which is exactly what made me uneasy. The vows were standard, traditional. To have and to hold, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health. When Natalie said, "I do," her voice rang clear as a bell. When Philip said, "I do," his voice was measured, precise, like a man signing a contract. They kissed. The crowd cheered. 200 people celebrated the union of two families who looked perfect from the outside and were crumbling from within. As the newlyweds walked back down the aisle, showered in rose petals, I caught my father's eye. He was standing in the front row, still wiping tears, his arm around my mother. He looked at me. For a second, just a second, something flickered across his face. Not love, not pride. Recognition. Like he'd just remembered I was there. Then he looked away, back to Natalie, back to the golden child, and the moment was gone. The reception began at 5 p.m. in the ballroom, crystal chandeliers, the 12-piece orchestra playing swing standards, a raw bar that cost more than my first year of college, open bar with top-shelf liquor. The head table seated the bride and groom, their parents, and the maid of honor. Natalie's sorority sister, Brittany. I was at table 9, near the kitchen, with distant cousins and my father's business associates' wives. "Are you the bride's sister?" the woman next to me asked. "I am." "Oh, how lovely. You must be so proud." "I am," I said. And I wondered how many times I'd say that tonight. How many times I'd perform pride I didn't feel. The toasts began at 7. Best man first. Philip's college roommate. And a hedge fund analyst who made 3 jokes about golf and one about how Philip always got what he wanted. The crowd laughed. Brittany's maid of honor speech was long, emotional, and entirely about how Natalie was The most amazing person she'd ever met. She cried 3 times. Standing ovation. Then my father stood. Ladies and gentlemen, Robert Ashford adjusted his tie, settled into his boardroom voice. Tonight, I'm not just celebrating a wedding. I'm celebrating everything the Ashford family stands for. He talked about legacy, about tradition, about how Natalie embodied the best of what this family has to offer. He talked about Philip and the Cole family, about the merging of 2 great names. And then he said something that made every hair on my arm stand up. To mark this occasion, Natalie's mother and I have prepared a special gift. He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. Inside this envelope is the deed to the Ashford family's vacation property on Lake Champlain. 5 bedrooms, waterfront. It's been in the family for 30 years. Gasps from the crowd. Natalie's hands flew to her mouth. Philip's eyes lit up. Additionally, my father continued, beaming, we're establishing a joint investment account for Natalie and Philip, seeded with $250,000 from the Ashford Development Group. $250,000? From the company. My company. I felt the blood drain from my face, not because of the property, not even because of the money, but because I knew, with absolute certainty, that those funds were coming from the same pool of unauthorized distributions that Margaret Zhao had documented. My father was giving away company money, my grandfather's money, my money, as a wedding gift, in front of 200 witnesses. Richard Cole rose and shook my father's hand. Generous man, we're proud to be family. Natalie was crying. Mom was crying. The room erupted in applause. I sat at table 9, my granola bar sitting like a stone in my stomach, and I thought, this is it. This is the moment Grandpa told me about. The moment when the pain outweighs the patience. I excused myself from the table and walked to the bathroom. Locked myself in a stall. Pulled out my phone. One text to Margaret Zhao. He just gave away $250,000 of company money as a wedding gift. Publicly. In front of 200 people. Her response came in 30 seconds. Documented. Rachel is preparing the filing. We move when you're ready. I stared at the screen, and my hands were steady. My heart was calm, and I realized something strange. I wasn't angry. I was done. Done waiting. Done watching. Done being invisible. I typed back, I'm ready. Make the call. I returned to the ballroom, sat down at table 9, smiled at the cousin who asked if I was okay. Just needed some air, I said. The dancing had started. Natalie and Philip swayed under a spotlight while the orchestra played At Last by Etta James. My mother slow danced with my father. Richard Cole danced with Catherine. Even Brittany was on the floor, champagne sloshing from her glass. Nobody asked me to dance. Nobody noticed I'd been gone. I sat and I waited. At 8:47 p.m., my father's phone rang. He was standing near the bar, laughing with Richard Cole and 2 other men I didn't recognize. I watched him pull out his phone, glance at the screen, frown. He stepped away from the group, pressed the phone to his ear. Hello? I couldn't hear the conversation, but I could see his face. The smile faded first, then the color, then the confidence. His free hand gripped the edge of the bar like he was trying to keep himself upright. He said something into the phone, short, sharp. Then he hung up and stood very still, staring at nothing. My mother appeared at his side. Robert, what is it? He didn't answer. His eyes swept the ballroom. Searching. They found me at table 9. I held his gaze, didn't look away, didn't blink. His face went from pale to gray. What my father had just learned from Margaret Zhao herself was the following. 1. His father's estate included a subsequent will, filed under seal with the probate court. That superseded the 2012 testament. 2. that will granted 51% controlling interest in Ashford Development Group to Clara Ashford, effective as of her 25th birthday, which had passed 4 years ago. 3. A forensic accounting report documenting $2.3 million in unauthorized distributions from the company had been completed and was ready for filing with the State Attorney General's office. 4. The $250,000 wedding gift announced publicly that evening constituted an additional act of corporate waste, witnessed by 200 people. 5. Clara Ashford, as majority shareholder, was formally requesting an emergency meeting with the company's legal counsel within 72 hours. Margaret delivered all of this in her measured, professional tone. She did not threaten. She did not raise her voice. She simply stated facts. Facts, as Grandpa William always said, speak for themselves. My father found me 20 minutes later. I'd moved to the garden terrace, away from the music and the dancing. The night was warm. Crickets sang in the hedges. Inside, 200 people celebrated without any idea that the foundation beneath them had just cracked. Clara! His voice was strangled, like someone had their hands around his throat. I turned from the railing. Hi, Dad. What have you done? I haven't done anything. Margaret Zhao called you. She's Grandpa's lawyer. I know who she is. His hands were trembling. Actually trembling. I'd never seen my father's hands shake, not at Grandpa's funeral, not at any crisis I'd witnessed. But they were shaking now. This is insane. Your grandfather's will was executed 12 years ago. Everything was settled. His first will was executed. His second will, the one dated 14 months before his death, was filed under seal with the probate court. Margaret has the original. It's been authenticated. Authenticated by whom? By the court. By independent counsel. By 2 witnesses who are still alive and willing to testify. I kept my voice even. Clinical. The way Grandpa William used to talk when he was explaining why a structure needed reinforcement. It's valid, Dad. You can contest it, but you'll lose. His jaw worked. Your grandfather was sick. He was on medication. He wasn't thinking clearly. He was diagnosed 14 months before his death. The will was executed 3 months before the diagnosis. He was of perfectly sound mind. Someone manipulated him, that lawyer. Margaret Zhao has practiced estate law for 30 years. Her reputation is impeccable. And Grandpa chose her specifically because he knew you'd try to discredit her. My father stared at me. Really stared. Like he was seeing me for the first time. Not Clara the quiet one. Not Clara the practical one. Clara, the woman who'd been building a case against him for 3 months, with the precision of an architect designing a load-bearing wall. Why? He whispered. Why would you do this? Because you stole from his company, Dad. $2.3 million in unauthorized distributions. Money that should have been reinvested. Money that went to the house, the cars, Natalie's apartment, this wedding. I gestured toward the ballroom. And tonight, you announced another $250,000 gift from company funds. In front of 200 witnesses. That was a gift for your sister. That was company money. Not personal funds. Company money. And you didn't have board authorization to distribute it because there is no board. You dissolved it 6 years ago so no one could question your spending. He opened his mouth, closed it. The trembling in his hands had spread to his jaw. How long? He asked. How long have you known about this? About the will. Since Grandpa told me. 2 weeks before he died. The look on his face, I'll never forget it. Not shock. Not anger. Horror. The horror of realizing that the daughter he'd dismissed for 29 years had been holding the keys to his kingdom since she was 17. You've known for 12 years. His voice was barely audible. And you never said anything. I was waiting. For what? For you to give me a reason not to use it. I looked at him steadily. You never did. Silence. The orchestra played inside. Laughter drifted through the windows. Somewhere, Natalie was dancing with her new husband, blissfully unaware. What do you want? My father asked. The boardroom voice was gone. This was the voice of a man who'd just realized the ground beneath him was hollow. I want a meeting. 72 hours. You, me, Margaret, and a corporate attorney. We review the financials. We restructure the company. We create an independent board with real oversight. And if I refuse? Then the forensic accounting report goes to the state attorney general, and the $2.3 million in unauthorized distributions becomes a criminal matter, not just a civil one. His face went from gray to white. You'd do that? To your own father? You'd steal from your own father's company. We both crossed lines, Dad. The difference is, I'm giving you a chance to make it right. He stared at me for a long time. The music swelled inside. A slow song. Probably the father-daughter dance. He should have been in there. Instead, he was out here, watching his empire tremble. 72 hours, he said finally. 72 hours. He turned and walked back inside. His steps were unsteady, like a man who'd just stepped off a boat onto dry land and couldn't find his balance. I stayed on the terrace, breathed in the night air, looked up at the stars and thought about Grandpa William, about Sunday mornings in his workshop, about the birdhouses he built with arthritic hands, about the last words he ever said to me. Don't let them erase you, Clara. I haven't, Grandpa. I haven't. I need to stop here for a moment. If you've ever confronted someone who underestimated you, if you've ever watched the moment they realized they were wrong, I want to hear about it. Type, "They didn't see me coming," in the comments. And please, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because what happened next, the meeting, the fallout, what Philip did when he found out the truth, it's all coming. And it changes everything. Now, back to the story. The rest of the wedding passed in a blur. I returned to the ballroom, sat at table 9 and watched my family perform happiness while the foundation cracked beneath them. My father danced with Natalie. He held her close, whispered something in her ear that made her laugh. But his eyes, over her shoulder, found me. And in those eyes, I saw something I'd never seen before. Fear. My mother noticed something was wrong. She kept touching his arm, leaning in to whisper questions. He shook his head each time. Later, I read on his lips. Not now. Philip danced with Catherine, then with Natalie, then with Brittany. He was the perfect groom. Attentive, charming, saying all the right things. But I noticed something. Every time someone mentioned the lake house or the $250,000 investment account, Philip's smile brightened. Noticeably, measurably, like a dial being turned up. He wasn't smiling at Natalie. He was smiling at the money. I filed that observation away. It would matter later. At 11 p.m., the reception wound down. Guests filtered out in clusters, slightly drunk, thoroughly charmed. Natalie and Philip made their grand exit through a tunnel of sparklers. Everyone cheered. I stood at the end of the tunnel, holding my sparkler, watching my sister drive away in a vintage Rolls-Royce toward the honeymoon suite at the Belmont. My mother found me in the parking lot as I was loading tablecloths into my car. Because of course I was the one loading tablecloths. "Clara, your father seems upset. Did something happen?" "You should ask him." "I'm asking you." I closed my trunk, looked at my mother in the glow of the parking lot lights. She looked tired beneath the makeup, older than I remembered. "Something's going to change, Mom. Soon. And when it does, I need you to remember one thing." "What?" "I gave him a chance. I'm giving all of you a chance. What you do with it is up to you." She stared at me, confused. Frightened, maybe. Then she shook her head and walked away. Back to my father. Back to the life she'd chosen. I drove home alone. My apartment was quiet. Dark. I sat on my bed in my bridesmaid dress and called Margaret. "It's done," I said. "How do you feel?" "Exhausted." "That's normal. Rest tonight. Tomorrow we work." "Margaret?" "Yes?" "Thank you for keeping your promise to him." A pause. Then softly, "He'd be proud of you tonight, Clara. So proud." I hung up, took off the dress, folded it carefully and put it in the back of my closet. I wouldn't need it again. The 72-hour meeting took place on a Tuesday morning in Margaret Zhao's conference room. My father arrived with his personal attorney, a man named Douglas Price, who looked like he hadn't slept since Saturday. I arrived with Margaret, Rachel Torres, Jazz and the forensic accountant, David Chen, 3 women and a financial expert, facing down 2 men who'd assumed the world was built for them. The conference room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Philadelphia stretched out below us, its skyline dotted with buildings my grandfather had helped construct. I wondered if my father ever thought about that, about the hands that built the view he took for granted. "Before we begin," Douglas Price said, settling into his chair with the confidence of a man who bills $600 an hour, "my client wants to state for the record that he disputes the validity of the alleged second will." "Noted," Margaret said. She didn't blink. "And for the record, the will has been authenticated by the probate court, witnessed by 2 living individuals, declared, and filed in compliance with Pennsylvania Statute Title 20, Section 2502. We can spend the next 6 months litigating its validity, during which time your client's $2.3 million in unauthorized distributions will be reviewed by the state attorney general. Or we can have a productive conversation." Price glanced at my father. My father stared at the table. "Let's talk," Dad said quietly. For the next 4 hours, David Chen walked through 12 years of financial records. Every unauthorized withdrawal, every personal expense charged to the company, every contract that was underbid to benefit my father's friends, every maintenance project that was deferred to fund Natalie's lifestyle. The numbers were devastating. $2.3 million in unauthorized distributions, $1.4 million in deferred maintenance that had reduced property values, with $600,000 in below-market contracts awarded to associates, and $250,000 given away at a wedding 3 days earlier. The total financial impact to Ashford Development Group, David concluded, is approximately $4.5 million. On a company valued at $18 million, that represents a 25% erosion of value over 12 years. My father sat through all of it. His face was a mask, but his hands, those trembling hands, gave him away. "What do you want, Clara?" he asked when David finished. "I want what Grandpa William wanted, a company that's run properly, an independent board, transparent finances, and accountability." "You want to take the company from me." "No, I want to save it from you." I didn't say it cruelly. I said it the way Grandpa would have said it, like diagnosing a structural problem. Not personal, just factual. "You're not a bad person, Dad, but you're a bad CEO. And if nothing changes, the company Grandpa built will be worthless in 10 years. "So what's the proposal?" Price asked. Margaret slid a document across the table. "Restructuring agreement. Clara assumes her role as majority shareholder. An independent board of 5 members is established, including 2 of Clara's choosing, 2 of Robert's, and 1 neutral. Robert retains the title of CEO for a transitional period of 12 months, during which Clara and the board will conduct a full operational review." "And after 12 months?" my father asked. "The board decides whether to retain you based on performance. If you've cleaned up the finances and demonstrated competent leadership, you keep the job. If not..." Margaret left the sentence hanging. And the $250,000? Price asked. If the wedding gift? Must be returned to the company within 90 days, Rachel said. The property deed transfer can stand, as the lake house was a personal asset, not a corporate one. But the cash distribution was company money, and it needs to come back. The room went quiet. My father stared at the document. If I sign this, Natalie loses the investment account. Natalie loses stolen money, I corrected. There's a difference. She's your sister, Clara. And this is Grandpa's company. He built it for the family, not for one person's wedding fund. The silence stretched. My father picked up the pen. Set it down. Picked it up again. I never meant to hurt you, he said. Not looking at me, looking at the pen. I know you don't believe that, but it's true. You didn't mean to hurt me. You just didn't think about me at all. That's worse, Dad. He flinched. Then he signed. The fallout began the same afternoon. My father called my mother from the parking lot of Margaret's office. I don't know exactly what he said, but I know the result. My mother called me 45 minutes later, hysterical. What have you done? She screamed. Your father just told me everything. A secret will? A forensic audit? Are you trying to destroy this family? I'm trying to save the company Grandpa built. The company? This isn't about the company. This is about jealousy. You've always been jealous of Natalie. Mom, she just got married. She just started her life. And you're trying to take everything away from her. I'm not taking anything from Natalie. She has her trust fund, exactly what Grandpa intended. And the $250,000 was company money that Dad had no right to give away. Company money, family money. What's the difference? About $2.3 million and a potential criminal investigation. That's the difference. Silence. Then, you wouldn't. I won't. Not if Dad follows the agreement. Agreement. She spat the word. You bullied your father into signing something under duress. I presented facts. He made a choice. That's not duress. That's accountability. You're cold, Clara. You've always been cold. That's why we... She stopped herself. That's why you what, Mom? Finish the sentence. I have to go. She hung up. But I heard what she almost said. That's why we chose Natalie. The quiet part, said out loud. Almost. Natalie found out 3 days after returning from her honeymoon. Cancun. 5-star resort. Paid for by Philip's parents, thankfully, not the company. She called me at 9 p.m. on a Wednesday. I was at my drafting table working on a design for a community housing project, my first major solo commission. Clara. Her voice was flat, controlled. The voice she used when she was furious but hadn't decided how to weaponize it yet. Hi, Natalie. Mom told me everything. I figured she would. You're taking our investment account. I'm returning company funds that were distributed without authorization. Same thing. It's really not. Silence. I heard her breathing. Then, why? Why would you do this to me? On my wedding weekend? I didn't do anything on your wedding weekend. The phone call was to Dad. The meeting was 3 days later. Your ceremony wasn't interrupted. Your reception wasn't disrupted. I made sure of that. Oh, how generous of you. Her voice dripped with sarcasm. You waited until after the party to destroy everything. Natalie, the money was never yours. It was Grandpa's. It belongs to the company. Grandpa left everything to Dad. Grandpa left a second will. One that gives me controlling interest. I've been the majority shareholder since I turned 25. Dead silence. Then, that's impossible. Margaret Zhao has the documents. You're welcome to have your own attorney review them. Margaret who? Grandpa's lawyer. The woman he trusted to protect the company from exactly this situation. More silence. Then, very quietly. Did you plan this? All along? This whole time, you've been plotting? I've been waiting. There's a difference. I waited for 12 years, Natalie. 12 years hoping Dad would do the right thing on his own. He didn't. He didn't steal. He was running the family business. He took $2.3 million in unauthorized distributions. That's not running a business. That's looting one. I heard her voice crack. Philip is going to be devastated. And there it was. Not. I'm devastated. Not. Our family is in crisis. Philip is going to be devastated. About the money. Why would Philip be devastated? I asked carefully. The lake house is still yours. The trust fund Grandpa left you is untouched. The only thing being returned is the $250,000 that came from the company. Because, she stopped. Because he was counting on that money. For investments. For our future. Your future should be built on your own achievements, Natalie. Not on stolen company funds. Don't lecture me. Her voice turned sharp. You don't get to lecture me. You've been hiding this for years. Years, Clara. While I was living my life, you were building some kind of case against our own father. While you were living your life on money he stole from the company. Yes. She hung up without saying goodbye. But the real earthquake came from Philip. Let me tell you about Philip Cole. What I learned in the weeks after the wedding. What I should have seen sooner. Margaret Zhao, being thorough, had done a background check on him before the wedding. Not because I asked. Because, as she put it, when new money enters a family structure, I like to know where it's coming from. What she found was troubling. Philip Cole came from money, yes, but his family's wealth was heavily leveraged. His father, Richard's law firm, had been losing clients for 3 years. Catherine's art council position was unpaid. The Hamptons' house had 2 mortgages. The Rolls-Royce was leased. The Coles looked wealthy. They were, in fact, drowning. Philip himself had a law degree from a decent school and a resume that was more impressive on paper than in practice. He'd bounced between 3 firms in 5 years. His current position was at his father's struggling practice. Margaret had given me this information before the wedding. I'd filed it away, unsure what to do with it. Now I understood. He married Natalie for the money, I said to Margaret over the phone. I can't prove intent, Margaret replied carefully. But the timeline is suggestive. Philip began dating Natalie 3 months after the Cole firm lost its biggest client. He proposed 8 months later. And the first thing he asked about, according to your Aunt Linda, was the Ashford Development Group's valuation. He asked about the company's value? At a dinner party. Casually. But yes. I sat with that information for a long time. 3 weeks after the wedding, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. Is this Clara Ashford? Speaking. My name is Philip Cole. His voice was smooth, polished. The voice of a man who'd been trained to sound trustworthy. I think we should meet. About what? About this situation with your father. I believe there's a way to resolve it that benefits everyone. I'm listening. Not over the phone, in person. Coffee. Tomorrow. I agreed. Not because I trusted him. Because I wanted to see his cards. We met at a cafe in Center City. Philip arrived in a blazer and loafers, looking every inch the mainline attorney. He ordered an espresso. I ordered black coffee. Clara, I appreciate you meeting me. You said you had a solution. I do. He leaned forward. Here's the situation as I see it. You have controlling interest in the company. Your father is cooperating. The restructuring is underway. But the process is slow. And in the meantime, the company's value is uncertain. Go on. I propose a buyout. My family's firm represents several investors who'd be interested in acquiring Ashford Development. Full market value. Everyone walks away with cash. You, your father, Natalie. Clean slate. I studied him. His perfectly knotted tie, his practiced sincerity, his eyes which were calculating even as his mouth smiled. What's the acquisition price you're proposing? $12 million. The company is valued at 18. was valued at 18. Before the financial issues came to light, investors will discount for risk. So you want me to sell my grandfather's company, the company he built from nothing, for $12 million, $6 million below value, to investors your family represents? It's a fair offer, given the circumstances. It's a lowball offer designed to strip the company from my family and profit your investors. I set down my coffee. How much is your commission, Philip? What percentage do the Coles take for facilitating the deal? His smile flickered. This isn't about commission. Everything with you is about commission. You married Natalie because you thought the Ashfords were worth $18 million. Now that the picture is more complicated, you want to liquidate and take a cut. That's offensive. It's accurate. I stood. The company isn't for sale, not to your investors, not to anyone. I'm going to do what my grandfather intended. Fix it. Build it back. Make it worth more than it ever was. Philip's mask slipped. Just for a moment. And underneath, I saw it. Contempt. Pure, undiluted contempt for the woman who'd just blocked his exit strategy. You're making a mistake, Clara. I've been told that my whole life. I'm still here. I left him sitting there with his espresso and his empty smile. That evening, I called Natalie. We need to talk about Philip. I don't want to hear it. He approached me about selling the company to investors his family represents. Silence. He wants a $12 million acquisition. The company's worth 18. He's trying to profit off our family. You're lying. Ask him. Ask him about the meeting today. Ask him about the investors. Ask him why a man who married you 3 weeks ago is already trying to liquidate your family's assets. Stop. Just stop. Her voice broke. Why are you doing this to me? To us? Because you deserve to know who you married, Natalie. Even if you hate me for telling you. She hung up, but she asked. I know she asked, because 2 days later, something remarkable happened. All right, I want to check in with you. That moment when Philip showed his true colors, when he tried to buy the company out from under me. Did you see it coming? Because Natalie didn't. She couldn't. Love, or what she thought was love, had made her blind. And if you've ever watched someone you care about marry the wrong person, if you've tried to warn them and they didn't listen, type, I tried to tell them, in the comments. And stay with me, because the next part, when Philip's mask finally falls completely, it's the moment everything changes. Now, back to what happened. Natalie showed up at my apartment unannounced on a Friday evening. No call, no text. Just a knock on my door at 8 p.m. She looked different. Not the radiant bride from 3 weeks ago. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. No makeup. Eyes swollen from crying. Can I come in? I stepped aside. She walked in, looked around my apartment. 1 bedroom, clean, simple. Architectural drawings pinned to the walls. A bookshelf organized by subject. Grandpa William's watch on the nightstand. This is where you live? She asked. Yes. It's so small. It's mine. She sat on my couch. I brought 2 glasses of water. She didn't touch hers. I asked him, she said, about the investors, about the buyout. And? He didn't deny it. Her voice was thin. He said it was just business, that I was being emotional, that the smart move was to cash out while the company still had value. She looked at me. He said those exact words. Cash out. What did you say? I said the company was my family's legacy, that my grandfather built it. She laughed bitterly. He said, your grandfather's dead, Natalie. It's just an asset now. Just an asset. Grandpa William's life's work. The hardware store in 1968. The calloused hands. The 60-hour weeks. Just an asset. Then I asked him something else. Natalie's voice dropped. I asked him why he married me. My chest tightened. What did he say? He said he loved me, but the way he said it, she pressed her palms against her eyes. It was like he was reading from a script. And then he said, "But love and financial security aren't mutually exclusive, Natalie. That's how the world works." "He's using you." "I know." The words came out cracked. "I know that now." She dropped her hands. Her eyes were raw. "Clara, I'm sorry." I waited. "I'm sorry for everything. For the way Mom and Dad treated you. For never standing up for you. For never asking how you paid for school. Or why you didn't come home. Or how you built this life without any of us." She gestured around my apartment. "You did all of this alone." "Not entirely alone. Grandpa helped. Susan Park helped. Margaret helped. But not us. Not your family." She shook her head. "We didn't help. We didn't even notice." "No, you didn't." We sat in silence for a long time, two sisters in a small apartment. One who'd had everything handed to her and lost it. One who'd had nothing and built something real. "What do I do?" Natalie whispered. "That's not my decision to make." "I know, but I'm asking. Because I trust you. I know I have no right to, but I trust your judgment more than anyone's." I looked at my sister, my beautiful, favored, lost sister, and I thought about Grandpa William, about mercy, about second chances. "First, you protect yourself legally. Get an attorney who isn't connected to the Cole family. Find out what your rights are." She nodded. "Second, you need to understand what Philip actually wants. If it's the money, if that's all it ever was, you need to know that now, before there are children involved, before the entanglement gets deeper. And third, you need to figure out who you are without Mom and Dad propping you up. Without Philip's name. Without the money." I paused. I had to do that at 18. It's harder at 27, but it's not impossible. She reached for my hand. I let her take it. Her fingers were cold, trembling. "Will you help me?" "Yes," I said. "But not the way I used to help. Not by doing everything for you. By standing beside you while you do it yourself." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. Okay. It wasn't forgiveness? Not yet. But it was the first honest conversation we'd had in 29 years. And that was something. The unraveling of Philip Cole happened quickly once it started. Natalie hired her own attorney, a woman named Sandra Kim, who specialized in matrimonial law. Sandra discovered what Margaret had already suspected. Philip had a prenuptial agreement buried in the wedding paperwork that Natalie had signed without reading carefully. It included a clause that entitled him to 30% of any family business interests acquired during the marriage. In other words, if the company were sold, Philip would take nearly a third. He planned this, Sandra told Natalie in a meeting I attended at Natalie's request. The prenup was drafted by his father's firm. It's designed to capture value from the Ashford Development Group. Natalie went very quiet, then very still. Then she said something I never expected to hear from my sister. "I want a divorce." Sandra nodded. "On what grounds?" "Fraud. He married me for access to the company. I have the emails between him and his father discussing the Ashford valuation before we were even engaged." "How did you get those emails?" "He left his laptop open." Natalie smiled. A thin, sharp smile I'd never seen on her face before. It reminded me of someone. It took a moment before I realized who. Grandpa William. She smiled like Grandpa William. "He underestimated me," Natalie said. "Everyone always does." I looked at my sister and thought, maybe there's more of Grandpa in the Ashford women than anyone realized. The divorce proceedings were swift. Philip, confronted with the emails between him and his father, chose not to contest. The prenup was voided on grounds of fraudulent inducement. The lake house was returned to the Ashford family. Philip kept nothing except his suitcase and his wounded pride. The last time I saw him was at the settlement signing. He walked out of the attorney's office, paused on the sidewalk, and looked back at me. "You ruined everything," he said. "No," I replied. "I just showed everyone what was already there." He removed his wedding ring, slowly, deliberately, dropped it into his jacket pocket. Then he walked away, disappeared into the Philadelphia afternoon, and out of the Ashford story forever. Okay, I need to pause here one final time. If you've ever watched someone take off their mask, if you've ever seen the moment a manipulator realizes the game is over, type karma in the comments. And if this story has meant something to you, please subscribe and hit that bell. I want to keep sharing stories like this, stories about ordinary people who found the courage to stand up for themselves. Now, let me tell you how this ends. 6 months after the wedding. December. The first snow of the season dusted the rooftops of Philadelphia. I stood at the window of my new office, the corner office on the 8th floor of Ashford Tower, the building my grandfather had constructed in 1985 as the company's headquarters. The nameplate on my door read, Clara Ashford, Chief Development Officer, not CEO. I didn't want that title, not yet. My father still held it, conditionally, under the oversight of the newly formed board. He'd cooperated with the restructuring, returned the unauthorized funds on a payment plan, accepted the board's authority with the reluctant grace of a man who knew his alternative was a prison sentence. The company was healing, slowly. Like a building after a renovation, you strip it down to the studs, assess the damage, reinforce what's salvageable, replace what isn't. It takes time. It takes patience. It takes someone who sees how things fit together. I was that someone. Grandpa William had always known. The first board meeting under the new structure took place on a Tuesday. 5 members around the table: Margaret Zhao, board chair; Susan Park, my old mentor, now a board member; David Chen, financial oversight; my father, CEO, probationary; and me, majority shareholder, chief development officer. I presented a 5-year plan. New focus on sustainable construction, community housing projects, partnerships with local trade schools, the kind of building that mattered, not just the kind that made money. Your grandfather would approve, Margaret said after the presentation. I hope so. My father said nothing during the meeting. Afterward, as the others filed out, he lingered, stood by the window, looking out at the skyline. Clara. Dad. The 5-year plan. It's good. Really good. He paused. Where did you learn all that? Architecture school? The job? The scholarships? The years of working while you and Mom funded Natalie's life? He winced. I deserve that. It wasn't meant as punishment. It's just facts. He turned from the window. For the first time in my life, my father looked old. Not distinguished. Not authoritative. Just old. And tired. And sorry. I was wrong about you, he said. I was wrong about everything. Yes. Can you forgive me? I thought about this for a long time. About the living room conversation, about not visible enough, about community college, about Table 9, about the granola bar I ate alone in a hallway while my family celebrated without me. I'm working on it, I said, but forgiveness takes time, and it starts with change, real change, not words, actions. He nodded. I understand. Good. He left my office. I sat down at my desk, the desk that had once been my grandfather's, and ran my hand across the worn wood surface. In the top drawer, I found something. A note, yellowed with age, in Grandpa William's handwriting. For Clara Bear, when you finally sit here, know that I'm smiling. I pressed the note to my chest and closed my eyes. Natalie moved into a studio apartment after the divorce. First apartment she'd ever paid for herself. She got a job. A real job. I as a communications coordinator for a nonprofit downtown. $38,000 a year. A fraction of what she was used to. But she earned it. And something about that changed her. We had dinner once a month now. Awkward at first. Gradually less so. She asked about the company. I asked about her work. We talked about Grandpa William, shared memories we'd never compared before. He used to tell me I was pretty, Natalie said one evening over pasta. Every Saturday when I came over. You're pretty, Natalie. She twisted her fork. I thought that was love. I didn't realize he was saying something different to you. What do you mean? He told you that you were smart, that you had the eye, that you saw how things fit together. She looked up. He was telling you that you mattered. He was telling me I was decorative. Natalie, that's not... It is. And it's okay, because now I get to decide what I am. She smiled. A real smile. Not the performance, not the Instagram version. Just Natalie, sitting in a cheap Italian restaurant, eating pasta she'd paid for with her own money. I'm figuring it out. Good, I said. That's all any of us can do. My mother and I were still careful with each other. She came to the office once, stood in the lobby looking at the portrait of Grandpa William that I'd hung in the entrance. He always loved you more, she said quietly. I think I resented you for that. He loved us both. He just saw us differently. I should have seen you, Clara. The way he did. Yes. You should have. She wiped her eyes. Is it too late? I thought about Grandpa's note in the drawer, about his voice in my memory, about second chances and load-bearing walls and structures that can be reinforced if you're willing to do the work. It's not too late, I said. But it's different now. We can't go back to what we were. I don't want to go back. I want to go forward. Then we start here. One conversation at a time. She nodded. And for the first time in 29 years, my mother looked at me and saw me. Not the quiet one. Not the practical one. Not the expense. Just Clara. Today, I'm sitting in my office at Ashford Tower. It's been a year since the wedding. The company is profitable again. 3 new development projects are underway. The Community Housing Initiative broke ground last month. The trade school partnership has enrolled 60 students. On my desk sits Grandpa William's birdhouse. The last one he ever made. A little crooked. I'm because his hands were shaking by then, but solid. Sound. Built to last. Next to it, Margaret Zhao's business card. 12 years in my wallet. The most valuable piece of cardstock I've ever owned. And in the top drawer, that note. For Clara Bear. When you finally sit here, know that I'm smiling. I think about what I've learned. What I'd tell anyone who's listening. Your family can love you and still fail you. Those 2 things can be true at the same time. And recognizing that isn't betrayal. It's honesty. It's the first step toward building something real. I was told I wasn't visible. I was told I wasn't an investment. I was told that people don't remember me. And you know what? They were right about one thing. People didn't remember me. Not because I wasn't memorable, but because they never bothered to look. But here's what I've learned. You don't need everyone to see you. You just need the right people. Grandpa William saw me. Susan Park saw me. Margaret Zhao saw me. And eventually, slowly, painfully, my own family learned to see me too. Not because I demanded it. Not because I forced it. Because I built something so undeniable that they couldn't look away anymore. That's not revenge. That's architecture. You design the structure. You lay the foundation. You build it brick by brick, day by day, year by year. And when it's done, it stands on its own. You don't need someone else's approval to know it's beautiful. You just need to trust the blueprint. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been the quiet one, the overlooked one, the one they said wasn't worth the investment, I want to hear from you. Subscribe, hit the bell, leave a comment telling me your story. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share it with them. Check the link in the description for more stories like this one. Stories about ordinary women who found the courage to stand up, speak out, and build something extraordinary from the ruins of what their families left behind. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for seeing me. Until next time, take care of yourself. You're worth more than you know.